My name is Savannah Clark. I'm 29 years old, and I stood alone at my daughter Lily's funeral while my parents clinked champagne glasses at my brother's poolside engagement party. Lily was just 6 months old when SIDS took her from us. As I watched her impossibly small white casket being lowered into the earth, the words my mother had said just days before echoed in my mind. "It's just a baby, Savannah. You'll have another. Brandon's celebration matters more." That moment shattered me, broke something so deep that I knew it would never quite be whole again. Before I tell you how I made them face the consequences of their choice, let me ask you, where are you watching from? Leave a comment below, because this isn't just a story about grief. It's a story about family betrayal so deep, it'll make you question who really deserves your loyalty. Growing up, I always knew I was second best. My older brother Brandon, now 33, was the golden boy, charming, ambitious, good at making everything look easy. My parents, Denise and Howard, built their world around him. And I was the afterthought, the dependable one, the practical one, the girl who never caused a fuss. When Brandon scored a B- on a high school science exam, they threw him a well-done dinner at his favorite steakhouse. When I was accepted into an advanced medical program, my mother looked up from folding laundry and said, "That's nice, honey," before asking Brandon how his real estate meeting went. I learned early that I could either demand their attention and be called emotional, or quietly build a life that mattered to me and hope they'd notice one day. They never did, so I stopped trying. Instead, I poured myself into my studies, into nursing, into being someone who mattered in the lives of strangers, if not in the eyes of my own family. It wasn't until I met Andrew during a hospital emergency drill, me, a nurse on rotation, him, a fire safety engineer, that I experienced what love looked like without conditions. He remembered the smallest details, celebrated my wins, held space for my losses. And his parents, warm, generous, thoughtful. When I told Andrew about the first time my parents forgot my birthday, because Brandon had bought a new car, he was stunned. But for me, that was just normal. We got married 3 years ago in a quiet ceremony in Asheville. Andrew's family did most of the planning. My parents showed up late, sat stiffly in the third row, and left before dessert. Still, I kept trying. When I found out I was pregnant with Lily, I told them right after I told Andrew's parents. They replied, "Oh, well, that's something. Brandon just landed a huge property deal in Charleston." They showed up to the baby shower Andrew's parents organized, only to spend most of it talking about Brandon's investment strategy. I laughed it off then. I told myself, this is just how they are. Focus on the joy. But nothing could have prepared me for what came after. For the day I held my daughter's tiny hand and had to say goodbye. Alone. For the moment, I realized my own mother believed my brother's pool party was more important than her granddaughter's life. And for the choice I had to make after that, to either let them keep writing this story their way, or finally take the pen back. And so I did. What came next wasn't revenge. It was truth. Sharp, undeniable, and long overdue. I wasn't supposed to talk about it. Not the way my birthdays were forgotten because Brandon had a soccer championship. Not the way my acceptance into nursing school was met with, "Well, that's a solid job. Not everyone can be a doctor, sweetie." Not the way Brandon's every minor milestone became a full family celebration while my accomplishments were brushed aside with a polite nod and a quick change of subject. When I was 8, I won first place at the state spelling bee. My dad clapped once and then turned to Brandon to ask how practice was going. Brandon had just made bench on his Little League team. That was the headline in our house that week. By high school, I had stopped bringing my report cards home. Straight A's had become expected, not celebrated. I remember hearing my mother tell a neighbor once, "Savannah's always been reliable. Brandon, though, he's got real spark." Reliable. That was me, the good girl, the background music to Brandon's spotlight. When I got my nursing degree with honors, my parents didn't come to the graduation. My dad had a minor surgery consultation that couldn't wait. Later, I found out he just didn't want to miss Brandon's open house for one of his new property flips. At first, I thought maybe it was me. Maybe if I were louder, more exciting, more unpredictable, maybe then they'd notice. But no matter what I did, I was always the second act to Brandon's show. So, I built a life outside of them. My career took off. I earned certifications, became known for handling high-pressure trauma cases, and moved to Asheville for a position at a top ER unit. That's where I met Andrew. He was smart, kind, and steady. The first time I brought him home to meet my parents, my mother looked him up and down and said, "Fire safety, huh? Well, at least it's stable." Then she asked Brandon if he'd booked that trip to Aruba yet. Andrew saw the pattern long before I was ready to admit it. "They act like you're just furniture," he said once after a holiday visit. "Present, useful, but never really seen." I wanted to argue with him, but I couldn't, because deep down, I already knew he was right. Still, a part of me always hoped that having a baby, having their grandchild, would finally change everything. That maybe, just maybe, Lily would be the bridge between us, that my parents would hold her and see what they had missed with me. But I was wrong. So painfully, heartbreakingly wrong. When I told them I was pregnant, my mom said, "Oh, how nice. Brandon's girlfriend might be proposing soon." When Lily was born, they didn't even come to the hospital until the next day. They brought a single balloon and stayed 35 minutes. My mom had a nail appointment. Andrew's parents, on the other hand, drove through a snowstorm that night. They cried when they saw Lily. His mother held her for hours, whispering lullabies. His father took a photo and printed it out that same day, framing it on their mantel. They showed up. They always showed up. And my parents? They kept proving, again and again, that their absence wasn't accidental. It was a choice, one that would become undeniable the day we buried Lily. By the time Lily was 3 months old, Andrew's parents had practically become second parents to me. They would show up every Sunday with groceries or just to give us an hour to nap. His mom would cook us dinner while his dad rocked Lily in the glider, humming old jazz tunes softly under his breath. They had already made her a personalized blanket, a scrapbook with milestones, and a small bookshelf filled with stories they couldn't wait to read to her. My parents had visited once, 3 weeks after Lily's birth. Not because they wanted to, but because one of my mother's book club friends was curious to see what the baby of a nurse and a fireman looked like. My mother made a comment about how Lily looked small and delicate, not quite Clark material, then spent the rest of the visit on her phone texting Brandon about some party plans. The second visit was even more impersonal. They were in town for one of Brandon's real estate mixers and had a bit of time to spare. My dad stayed in the car for 15 minutes on a business call. My mother came in, didn't take off her coat, and held Lily like she was a stranger's pet she didn't quite trust. When Lily started crying, she immediately handed her back to me with a forced laugh. Andrew never said it out loud, but I saw the look in his eyes. Disappointment, protective anger, heartbreak. For me, for Lily, for the family we tried so hard to include. But still, I sent them pictures. Weekly. Lily's first smile, her first coo, her first attempt to roll over. A little video of her grabbing Andrew's finger and refusing to let go. Sometimes my mom responded with a thumbs-up emoji. Most times, I got silence. I told myself they were just busy. That was the lie I needed to believe. 2 months before Lily died, Brandon announced he was proposing to his girlfriend, Vanessa. She was bright, stylish, and always looked like she belonged in an Instagram ad. They had been dating for 7 months. My parents were over the moon. My mom called me every other day, not to ask about Lily, but to gush over florists and venues and whether champagne towers were still trendy. When she told me they had booked Brandon's engagement party at a private villa with a pool and catered dinner, I tried to remind her, gently, that it landed on the same weekend as Lily's baby dedication at our church. We had invited them months ago. They had RSVP'd yes. "Oh, honey," she said dismissively, "we'll have to miss the baby thing. This is Brandon's engagement, for heaven's sake. He only gets one of these." "So does Lily," I wanted to say. "She only gets one dedication." But I didn't. Instead, I smiled over the phone and said, "It's fine. We'll send pictures." That night, After I put Lily to bed, I cried in the bathroom for an hour. Andrew found me curled up on the floor. He didn't ask what was wrong. He already knew. And I already knew too. I knew exactly where I stood in their world, at the edge, always just outside. What I didn't know, what I couldn't have known, was that I was standing at the edge of a cliff, and I was about to fall. It started like any other evening. Lily had a slight cold. Nothing alarming, just a stuffy nose, a little more fussiness than usual. I took her to the pediatrician that morning. He checked her lungs, her temperature, and told me it was a mild upper respiratory infection, something viral. "She'll be fine in a few days," he said, smiling. Still, I took the rest of the week off work. Something in my gut told me to stay close. I kept her warm, held her against my chest as we napped together, watched her tiny fingers curl around mine. By Sunday, she was smiling again, her gummy little grin lighting up the whole room. She giggled when Andrew made silly faces. She drank her bottle. She played with her plush fire truck, a gift from his father. I remember thinking, we're lucky, she's strong, we're okay. We were not okay. Tuesday night, we gave her bath, wrapped her in the yellow duck towel. I dressed her in her softest pajamas, the ones with the little clouds on them. Andrew fed her while I read her a story. Then we placed her gently in her crib, kissed her forehead, and turned on the monitor. The house was calm, quiet, safe. We had dinner on the couch and watched an episode of a show we barely followed anymore. I remember laughing. I remember Andrew touching my hand. We went to bed around 11. Lily didn't make a sound all night. When I woke up at 5:45 for my early hospital shift, something felt off. She usually stirred by then, even if just to fuss or coo. I walked into her nursery quietly, not wanting to wake her if she was sleeping soundly. The room was dim, painted in soft lavender, with stars on the ceiling that glowed faintly. Her crib was pristine. Her favorite bunny was resting beside her. And Lily, my daughter, my baby girl, was still. Too still. "Lily?" I whispered, moving closer, my chest already tightening. I touched her cheek. It was cold. I screamed. The next moments came in flashes, disjointed pieces of a nightmare I will never wake from. Andrew's footsteps pounding down the hallway, his voice shouting, "Call 911!" His hands on her chest, performing CPR as I collapsed to the floor, wailing. The dispatcher's calm, detached questions, the blinding lights of the ambulance, the EMTs whispering to each other, avoiding eye contact, the ER, the doctor, the words. "I'm so sorry. It appears to be sudden infant death syndrome. SIDS. No warning. No prevention. Just gone. Gone." Andrew dropped to his knees against the wall, sobbing. I stood frozen. I couldn't move, couldn't cry, couldn't breathe. They asked if we wanted to hold her one last time. We did. We held her for hours. We kissed her cool forehead, ran our fingers through her soft hair, whispered apologies and love and disbelief. The hospital chaplain came, then a grief counselor, then someone talking about arrangements. Arrangements for a funeral, for my child. Eventually, I remembered I needed to call my parents. With shaking hands, I dialed my mother. She answered on the second ring. "Mom," I said, my voice already breaking. "Lily! Lily died last night. SIDS. We're at the hospital." There was silence. Then, "Oh, Savannah, that's terrible." No gasp, no sob, no, "We're coming." No, "Oh my God." Just flat words, cold, like Lily's skin. "We'll need to make funeral arrangements," I continued, pleading silently for her to act like a mother, for once. "Yes, I suppose you will," she replied, her tone unchanged. "Let us know the details." That was it. Andrew's parents arrived within an hour, disheveled and heartbroken. They stayed with us the whole day, held us while we cried, made calls, handled paperwork. My parents? They didn't come. They didn't call back. They didn't ask if we needed anything. The funeral was set for Friday at 11 a.m. I called my mother again that evening. Her voice was cheerful, as if we hadn't spoken the day before. Friday? She repeated. Oh no, Savannah. That's the day of Brandon's engagement party. We've already made all the arrangements. Caterer, flowers, the live band. We can't cancel now. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Mom, I said, my voice low, shaking. It's your granddaughter's funeral. She paused for a second before saying the words that would stay with me forever. I understand, but Lily was just a baby. Brandon's future is more important. Something inside me snapped. My vision blurred, not from tears, but from a rising, white-hot clarity. I'd spent my entire life being dismissed, but now they had dismissed my daughter's life, and they were about to learn what that cost. Friday morning arrived. The sun was bright. Birds were chirping. The kind of beautiful day that felt cruel when your world had collapsed. I stood in front of my closet for what felt like hours, staring at the black dress I had bought the day before. I didn't want to wear it, because wearing it made it real. Wearing it meant my daughter was gone. It meant I was picking out an outfit not for a birthday or a holiday, but to bury my baby. Andrew stood behind me, his hand resting gently on my shoulder. You don't have to do this alone, he whispered, but I already was. We drove to the cemetery in silence. In the back seat was a tiny casket, white with silver handles, covered in pink lilies. It looked like it should hold a doll, not a child, not Lily. As we stepped into the Garden of Angels, the section reserved for babies and young children, I felt like I was floating, detached, hollow. People began to arrive. Neighbors, colleagues, families from the pediatric unit I worked in. My childhood friend Zoe flew in from Texas. My college roommate Rachel came with her husband. Even my ER supervisor showed up with her wife, holding a small bouquet of forget-me-nots. The most noticeable absences? My parents, and my brother. They weren't just missing. They were present somewhere else, at Brandon's poolside engagement party, 3 miles away. During the service, Pastor Elijah spoke about Lily's brief but radiant life. Some souls, he said gently, complete their purpose in far less time than we expect. Lily brought light and love in her 6 short months. Her impact was profound. I clung to Andrew's hand as the casket was lowered. My knees buckled. Andrew's father steadied me while Andrew stood still, white-knuckled and pale. His mother wept openly, clutching Lily's bunny to her chest. As I dropped the first handful of soil onto her casket, my entire body shook. This was the moment. The moment it became final. No more waking up to her cries. No more late-night feedings. No more dreams of her first steps, first words, first everything. After the service, everyone returned to our home. They brought food, cards, and kind words that felt both necessary and meaningless. I walked through the rooms like a ghost. The house looked the same, but nothing was. In the quiet between visitors, I opened my phone. I don't even know why I did it. Maybe part of me was hoping, desperately, that my mother had sent a message, a last-minute apology, a change of heart. Instead, I found notifications. Instagram. Brandon had posted a photo slideshow from the engagement party. Champagne flutes, smiles, balloons. My mother in a glittering silver dress, toasting with a proud grin. My father clapping beside the pool, Brandon holding Vanessa in his arms like the king of a fairy tale. Caption, best day ever. Can't wait to marry the love of my life. Posted 26 minutes after Lily was placed in the ground. I felt like the air had been knocked from my lungs. Not only had they chosen the party over the funeral, they had celebrated, laughed, drank, toasted, while I sobbed over the grave of their granddaughter. I showed Andrew the photos. He didn't say a word. He didn't have to. We both knew. Something had changed, and there was no going back. Over the next few days, I sank into something I had never experienced before. Grief, yes, but also rage. Deep, burning rage that pulsed with every heartbeat. Every time the baby monitor blinked in the hallway, I looked toward it instinctively, only to feel that sharp stab of reality. Every time I walked past Lily's nursery, I stopped at the door, unable to move. We hadn't changed anything yet. Her crib. Her clothes, the mobile above her head, it all remained, like a museum of hope that had been abruptly closed. Andrew tried to go back to work, but returned home early each day, unable to concentrate. I didn't go back at all. I couldn't, because my body still expected to hold her, still felt the weight of her in my arms, still smelled the faint trace of baby lotion on the collar of my robe, and still heard my mother's voice in my head. It's just a baby. Brandon's future is more important. I hadn't heard from my parents since the funeral. No text, no call, no flowers, not even a card. Until exactly 1 week later. My phone rang. It was my mother. The name flashing across the screen made my stomach twist. I debated whether to answer, but something inside me said, "Pick it up. Hear it for yourself." I answered. "Savannah," she said brightly, as if nothing had happened. "How are you?" "My daughter died and was buried without her grandparents," I said. "How do you think I am?" There was a pause. "No need for that tone," she replied coolly. "We're calling to invite you and Andrew to Sunday dinner. It'll be good for you to get out of the house." My mouth fell open. "Brandon and Vanessa will be there," she added. "They've got some fun wedding plans to share. It might help you. Move on. Move on. Move on." As if Lily's death was a paper cut. As if my pain had an expiration date. "I don't think we'll make it," I said. "You can't shut yourself away forever," she warned. "It's been a week," I hung up. And when Andrew came into the room and saw me sitting on the bathroom floor, trembling, I told him everything. The call, the invitation, the absolute indifference. He clenched his jaw and shook his head. "They can't be real." "They are," I whispered. "They always have been." And something inside me clicked. I would go to that dinner, but not to eat, not to move on. I would go to look them in the eyes, and I would make sure they understood every inch of the devastation they had chosen to ignore. The following Sunday, Andrew and I drove to my parents' house in silence. I had spent the entire night rehearsing what I might say. But the truth was, I didn't know how the words would come out once I was in the same room with them. Once I had to look into the eyes of people who had chosen shrimp cocktails and party lights over their granddaughter's casket. Their house hadn't changed. Still the same manicured hedges, the same brass Clark nameplate by the front steps, the same wreath on the door. Only now it felt foreign, like stepping onto the set of someone else's perfect lie. My mother greeted us at the door wearing pearls and a floral apron, as if this were Easter brunch and not the aftermath of betrayal. "Savannah," she said, air kissing my cheek. "Andrew, come in. Dinner's almost ready. I made your favorite lemon thyme roast chicken." My father was in his recliner, half reading the newspaper. "Good to see you," he said, without looking up. We sat stiffly on the edge of the couch. Across from us, Brandon and Vanessa were lounging like royalty, flipping through wedding magazines. "Savannah, you won't believe the venue we toured," Vanessa said, with a glowing smile. "It's got this incredible stone arch, like a castle." "Yeah," Brandon added. "We're thinking fireworks for the grand entrance." I stared at them in disbelief. No mention of Lily, no condolences, not even a simple, "How are you holding up?" It was like she had never existed. We made it to dessert. That's when I broke. Vanilla bean cake, fresh raspberries. My mother proudly sliced into it like a hostess at a bridal shower. And I said quietly at first, "Did Lily's funeral get in the way of your party?" The room froze. My mother's smile faltered. Brandon set his fork down. My father cleared his throat. "Let's not bring up unpleasant topics at dinner," my mother said sharply. "Unpleasant?" I repeated. "You mean like burying your granddaughter while you were sipping cocktails 3 miles away?" "That's not fair," Brandon snapped. They had already made arrangements for the party. "You can't expect them to cancel last minute." "She was your niece, Brandon," I said. "You met her once. Once. And you couldn't show up for her funeral?" "She was only 6 months old," he muttered. "It's not like we were close." My heart pounded. I looked at my parents. "She was your granddaughter," I said, my voice trembling now. "And you told me she was just a baby. That you'd rather be at Brandon's party because he's your future." "Savannah," my father said, "there's no use dwelling on the past. What's done is done." "No," I said, standing. "What's done is your silence, your absence, your decision to turn your backs on me, on Lily, when it mattered most." My mother looked offended. "We didn't want to make a scene. Some relatives asked where we were, and we told them your father had back issues." "So you lied," I said. "Well, we couldn't exactly say we skipped the funeral for a pool party, could we?" That was it. That was the moment. Andrew, who had stayed quiet until now, pushed back his chair. "I've sat here biting my tongue, but this is unreal," he said. "Do you even hear yourselves? Do you understand what Savannah's been through?" "We're trying to help her move forward," my mom insisted. "No," I said, voice sharp now. "You're trying to erase what you did, to skip over it. But I won't let you." I reached into my bag and pulled out a framed photo. Lily, 5 months old, wearing the yellow bonnet Andrew's mother had knitted. I placed it on the table between us. "Look at her," I said. "Really look." They did, reluctantly. She was real. She had a laugh, a favorite toy, a morning routine. She mattered. Tears welled in my eyes, but I didn't stop. "And you chose not to be there when she was laid to rest. You chose Brandon's celebration over her memory. And now you want to pretend it didn't happen." I pulled out a printed timeline. Texts, photos, notes, everything that pointed to a lifetime of neglect, favoritism, and quiet erasure. My father tried to dismiss it. "Is this some kind of evidence board?" "No, Saeed," I said. "It's my life. And it's the proof that this wasn't just a one-time mistake. It was a pattern. You've made it clear for years. Brandon is the one who matters." I looked at Brandon. "And you knew it. You benefited from it." He had the decency to look down. "We didn't mean to hurt you," my mother whispered. "But you did," I replied. "You hurt me every time you dismissed my daughter, every time you told me to move on, every time you acted like grief had an expiration date." Silence. For once, no one had anything to say. Good. Because I had more. I pulled out the letter I had written the night before. I unfolded it and began to read. "My daughter died, and you weren't there," I said. "You were supposed to be, but you chose not to be, and that choice changed everything." Their expressions shifted. My mother began to cry. My father looked suddenly small. Brandon looked away completely. I finished the letter and folded it with care. "I'm not cutting you off," I said, rising. "But I am stepping away until you can acknowledge what happened, fully, without excuses." "Savannah, wait," my mother called after me. I turned to her. "I'm not going anywhere, Mom. I've always been here. You're the ones who didn't show up." And with that, Andrew and I walked out. I didn't look back, because the only thing behind me was the truth they refused to face. When we got home that night, I collapsed onto the couch, emotionally drained, but somehow lighter. I had done what I came to do. I had spoken the truth, out loud, in full view, no filters, no performance. For once, they didn't get to shape the narrative. I did. Andrew sat beside me, his arm around my shoulders. "They'll never forget today," he said. "I don't want them to forget," I replied. "I want them to finally see." The days that followed were quiet, eerily quiet. No calls, no texts, no knock on the door with tearful apologies. But something had shifted inside me. The silence no longer felt like punishment. It felt like space. Space to breathe, space to grieve on my own terms, space to remember Lily without bitterness clouding every memory. I started therapy with Dr. Palmer, a grief specialist, who also had a background in family trauma. She helped me put words to what I had carried for so long. The golden child, the scapegoat, the invisible daughter who became a mother and was still invisible. Week by week, the knots unraveled. Some sessions I cried so hard I couldn't speak. Others I raged. But slowly, I began to understand that I wasn't broken. I had been raised in a system that never saw me as whole to begin with. Andrew and I transformed Lily's nursery into a quiet memorial room. We kept the rocker, hung a canvas of her handprints, placed her photo in a central spot on the shelf beside her favorite bunny. It wasn't a shrine. It was a space where her memory lived gently, without shame. 3 weeks after the confrontation, a letter arrived in the mail. It had no return address, but I knew the handwriting. My father. Inside was a single sheet of stationery. Savannah, I've never been good with emotions. You know that. I read your letter every night since you left our house. I didn't sleep much after that. I don't have the words to undo what we did, but I need you to know. I'm sorry. Not just for the funeral. For everything. For the years of making you feel less. For the times I saw you hurting and said nothing. For treating your child like she didn't matter. She did. You do. I don't expect forgiveness, but I want to do better if you ever give me the chance. Dad? I stared at the letter, unsure how to feel. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. A week later, another package came. This time from my mother. Inside was a small velvet box. I opened it and found a silver ornament in the shape of an angel, engraved with Lily's name, her birth date, and her initials in soft cursive. There was a note. Savannah, I should have been there. I'll regret that choice for the rest of my life. No words will ever be enough, but I hope this small piece can live on your tree each year, so you know, she mattered to me. I was wrong. I'm so sorry. Love, Mom. I didn't cry, not at first, but later that night, when Andrew found me sitting in Lily's room with the ornament in my hand, I let it all out. For the first time, the tears weren't just grief. They were grief mixed with something else. Release. A few days later, I texted them both. I received your letters. Thank you for acknowledging what happened. I need time, but I hear you. We didn't rush to reunite. We didn't pretend nothing had happened. But we did begin, slowly, to talk again. To listen. We set boundaries. No minimizing, no comparing, no sweeping things under the rug. Just presence. And eventually, progress. The biggest surprise of all came one rainy afternoon in April when Brandon showed up at our door, unannounced. He held a small potted rosebush in his hands, blush pink blossoms just beginning to open. Hey, he said awkwardly, rain dripping from his jacket. I was wondering if I could plant this in Lily's garden. Andrew looked at me. I nodded. As Brandon dug into the soil beside our angel statue, he spoke for the first time about the funeral. I was selfish, he said, not looking up. I didn't understand what it meant. I thought being the favorite was just how it worked. I never thought about what you didn't get. I knelt beside him. You were a kid too, I said. They built the system. You just lived in it. He paused. But I'm not a kid anymore, and I should have been at her funeral. She was my niece. He placed the rosebush into the earth, patted down the soil, and stood up. I'm sorry, Savannah. Really. I nodded, my voice too full to speak. As he walked away, I realized he had finally seen her. He had finally seen me. 6 months after the funeral, spring arrived. The cherry blossoms bloomed in the park near our home. The garden we planted for Lily was full of life. Tulips, daffodils, the blush rosebush Brandon had brought, and a small angel statue that stood at its center. I stood there one morning, the soft sun warming my face, and felt something I hadn't felt in months. Peace. Not because the grief was gone. Grief doesn't vanish. It becomes part of you, reshaping everything you thought you understood about life. But for the first time since that horrible morning, I didn't feel like I was drowning in it. I felt like I could breathe. Andrew walked out to join me, wrapping an arm around my waist. She'd love it out here, he said quietly. Yes, I replied, running my hand along the edge of the rosebush. She would've. Our lives weren't the same. They never would be. But we had created a new rhythm. I was volunteering weekly at a local organization that supported families who had experienced infant loss. My background as a nurse helped. My experience as a grieving mother helped even more. I met other parents whose children were gone too soon. Some had stories like mine, of being ignored, invalidated, even blamed. During one group session, a woman named Rachel broke down in tears, My in-laws told me to try again, she said, like my baby was a failed recipe. Like any baby would do. She looked up at me through tears and asked, "How do you live with people like that?" I took her hand gently. "You draw a line," I said, "and you speak your truth, even if your voice shakes. You remind them that your baby was real, that their life mattered." I told her about Lily, about my parents, about the funeral. Her eyes widened. "What did you do?" "I made them face it," I said simply. And then I focused on healing. With or without their understanding. She nodded slowly, and I saw something shift in her. That moment reminded me why I kept showing up. This was my way of honoring Lily, not by letting go of her, but by letting her memory be a force for good. Andrew and I had also started talking, quietly, carefully, about the idea of another child. Not to replace Lily, no child could, but maybe to welcome love back in another form. "I'm scared," I told him one night, curled up in Lily's old rocking chair. "What if something happens again? What if I can't love them without guilt?" He took my hand. "Then we'll love them with Lily, not in place of her, in addition to her." It wasn't an answer, but it was a beginning. Our relationship with my parents had settled into something cautious but honest. They visited once a month, brought flowers to Lily's garden. My father had started a small scholarship fund in her name at the hospital where I used to work. They still stumbled, sometimes falling back into old habits. But they listened now. They asked questions. They didn't flinch when I said Lily's name. That, more than anything, mattered. On the 1-year anniversary of Lily's death, we held a small remembrance ceremony in the garden. Andrew's parents were there, of course, steadfast, weeping quietly, holding each of our hands. My parents came too. They stood on the edge of the garden, awkward and uncertain, but respectful. Brandon and Vanessa arrived later. They brought a tiny stuffed bear and placed it gently beside the angel statue. As we released biodegradable balloons into the sky, I whispered, "You were loved. You are still loved." And for a moment, I swore I felt her in the breeze. Not in a supernatural way, but in the impact she had left behind. She had taught me what unconditional love felt like. In her death, she had taught me about the fragility of life, the clarity of pain, and the power of truth. She had given me purpose. For those of you watching who've been through something similar, I want you to hear this. You are not crazy. You are not selfish for needing space. You are not wrong for demanding respect in your grief. You deserve to have your loss acknowledged, your pain honored, your voice heard. Because healing isn't about forgetting. It's about remembering, on your terms. If Lily's story touched you, I hope you'll share this video with someone who needs it. And if you've ever stood alone in a moment of grief while others chose celebration, know this: you are not alone anymore. Your truth matters, and so did theirs. Thank you for listening. Be gentle with yourselves. You deserve that kindness.